Good evening. Tonight we're going to talk about the best guitar solos that we all took for granted. Those are the solos that we've all heard. We're not talking about obscure solos, but solos we've all heard. But solos that we kind of don't notice, maybe because the guy playing them was doing his job and kind of fitting into a song. So you don't suddenly have the whole song kind of distracted by a big dramatic solo, but really tasteful, well done solos that are within the service of a song. As opposed to some songs, I think, as great as the guitar playing, the song is kind of in the service of the solo. You know, the solos are so great, the song is kind of an afterthought. And I think some of the great, not all, but some of the great solos we always talk about, the song is kind of second to the guitar playing or the instrumentation. And these are solos that are part of a song. And maybe the fact that we don't talk about them as much shows that the guy did his job. You know, they're solos that are kind of flow with the music so much, and they just complement the vocals so much that you almost don't, it doesn't really call attention to itself in the way that, Eric Clapton Crossroads does, where, everyone just kind of sits there amazed and the vocal is just kind of there, it's all about the guitar. So I just made a list of 10. I'm sure you can add a lot more. There are so many out there, but I made a list of 10. I kind of call it a ranking, but I don't know. I don't think it's too precise a ranking, but it is a list of 10 solos I've always admired. And the older I get, the more I realize how great these people playing these solos were. I'm not going to play any clips for obvious reasons. I don't want any YouTube problems. And we're not going to do like big bios on all these people. None of these people are obscure. Almost all these people played on all kinds of records. You can Google them. But I'm going to mention the 10 solos that I think are kind of unsung, and they're great solos in classic rock history. Coming in at number 10 is the beautiful guitar solo in My Love by Paul McCartney. My Love by Paul McCartney and Wings. That was a 1973 recording. Just a terrific song. McCartney songwriting at its best. But that My Love solo really kind of added a rocky kind of element to it. And one of the stories is, McCartney is so meticulous in the studio, sometimes it almost takes away from the spontaneity of rock and roll. And the solo was played by the Wings guitar player Henry McCullough, and McCartney had been kind of directing very hands-on with this recording. And McCullough asked Paul if he could just maybe try something. He just kind of had an idea, and he went and played that beautiful kind of bluesy solo in My Love, which is so beautiful, and really took the song to another place. I'm such a big Paul McCartney fan, but sometimes people say if he's not careful, he can end up being kind of like Hoagie Carmichael or something, and that really added such a great touch. And Henry McCullough was the guy, I think he was Irish, and he played on all those Wings records. I think he just passed away. I've got it in my notes. He passed away in 2016. But the older, when you think of the Wings, you don't often think of like big guitar. You think of a lot of good songs. Wings were great, by the way. But really, now that I'm older, I listen to like Band on the Run, Live and Let Die, Junior's Farm, Hell and Wheels. Those are all that's really good guitar playing. And he was playing on a lot of all that stuff. He was the Wings guitarist. But that solo in My Love is extra nice. And like with all these, I'm going to put a link in the comments and to the YouTube, and you can listen to that. But it's a really beautiful solo. It's a highlight of the Paul McCartney and Wings era, in my opinion. Number 9 is the guitar solo by Hugh Burns for the Gerry Rafferty song Baker Street. I remember when Baker Street was on so much. It was never an album I would have rushed out to buy. But now that I'm older, I think he was in Stealers Wheels. He had that one album that was just huge. I was I think a senior in high school, and but that song Baker Street. Now a lot of people will often mention the saxophone solo in that, which is great too. But there's also a really nice guitar solo in that. And like I said, it's just kind of in the song. You almost, no one ever mentions that solo along with, all the great solos, but it's a very nice guitar solo, and it's just right for the song. And that was late 70s. That was an era of, it was still classic rock. It was still FM rock, and it was before computers took over music, which was unfortunate in my opinion, but it was also the late 70s. There was a lot of really well-crafted stuff in rock. It wasn't so crazy all the time always, and that's a really nice solo. Hugh Burns is the guy's name. And I read somewhere, he's one of, several of these people are kind of ticked off. They might have got like just some day fee or stipend or something for playing these solos that went on to be parts of records that made, tens of millions of dollars in some cases. And so unsung, Hugh Burns, I bet a lot, I didn't know that much about the guy, but I just always remembered that solo, and I wasn't even, that wasn't even a song necessarily I would have rushed out to buy. I mean, I like it, I respect it, but it wasn't a song I would have been all over and never have been. But I always remembered that guitar solo as being such a nice one, and boy, you sure heard it a lot. It was not some obscure track that was on the radio every 5 minutes for years. And it still is played quite a bit. Baker Street. Number 8 is the solo in Jackson Browne, Doctor My Eyes Have Seen the Years. That's 1972. That was by a really great guitar player that was in a lot of 70s rock, Jesse Ed Davis. He played for all kinds of people, including George Harrison, Eric Clapton. Passed away, I think, of some bad behavior, but he passed away in 1988. But he was at the concert for Bangladesh. But that solo in Doctor My Eyes is just great. And the song is so good, like I said, you almost don't notice it, but it's a big, long, extended solo. And from what I understand, the song had kind of been recorded, everything, and he just kind of walked in and started playing along with it. I mean, they hired him to do the solo, but he just started kind of walking in and playing along with it. The guy rolled the tape, and a classic guitar solo, Jesse Ed Davis. And you can Google and research. He was an American Indian, a Native American guy. Just a fantastic guitar player, and played with all kinds of fantastic people. Just kind of unsung. I don't think he's talked about as much today. Now, you can Google all these people, and these are not obscure people. A lot of them were in studios. A lot of them were on dozens and dozens of awesome records. So, but they were never big stars. They were often kind of behind the scenes or session players, or maybe in stage bands and things. But he was an extra good one, Jesse Ed Davis, and he played a lot of solos. I'm sure you've heard, but that one in Doctor My Eyes which is a great song anyway. But that's such a nice solo. I always love that song. And I miss Jackson Browne. We still have the Eagles, but you don't hear too much from Jackson Browne anymore. But he sure did have some good songs, especially some of that early stuff before he cut his hair. Really, really great. Next one is kind of one that takes you back a little bit. Some of these are kind of the 70s, I guess. But "Baby Come Back" by Player. They were kind of a one-hit wonder in a way, but that was a huge hit. I saw Player in 1978 with Eric Clapton, and I knew that song. That song was on the radio every 5 seconds. So I saw them when they played that song, and it was a hit. And that was back when they still had the concept of hits. So, I wasn't that excited. I liked the song, but I wasn't that excited to see them. But I remember he got up and they played. That was the only song I knew in their whole set. They played, I think, about an hour before Eric Clapton came on. But when they did that "Baby Come Back," the guy's name is Peter Beckett. He's a British guy. And he played that beautiful solo at the end of "Baby Come Back," and live. It was just so nice. And there are two versions of that song, "Baby Come Back." One of them, I think the shorter one for AM radio, they cut out a lot of most of the solo, but there's a more extended version, and that's the one you want to listen to. But it's a really nice solo. And he's a really interesting guy. Preparing for this, I saw some interviews with him. on YouTube, and he's still around, and I think he has a version of Player. They still go around and play. I think he's in a group now. He has a group called Ambrosia, but he's actually from Liverpool. For some reason, I thought they were kind of an American band. I wasn't that crazy about them, really, but I just remembered he really played a great solo at the end of that song. But he's from Liverpool. He's a British guy, and he talked in one interview about going to see the Beatles in the Cavern and how loud it was. His brother took him to see the Beatles, and it was so great. And he's a rocker. And that solo shows that he's a rocker. I think some people, that Player is kind of yacht rock or light rock to some people, and maybe it is, which isn't. There's nothing wrong with that, but he's a rocker, you know, and he still is, you know. So the guy's name is Peter Beckett, and he was kind of the leader of that band. I think he was kind of the main guy in it, and he wrote that song, I think, and sang it, and then played that beautiful solo at the end. Just really nice. Next, this is an interesting one. I kind of put this in. Some of these were kind of FM rock, but bordering on AM. But I grew up with FM rock, unlike some people younger than I am. So I remember like WRF in Detroit, WWWW Quad back then, and they played these songs all the time. So they're FM rock. But it's Orleans, Still the One. And the guy, that's got good riffing all the way through it. You know, I remember when I was a kid, just I would always love it when that song came on the radio. It's kind of one of those upbeat songs. It just, you know, so pleasant. You can't help but like it. But it's got great riffing all the way through it. Now, the guy that played all the guitar on Still the One by Orleans is a guy named John Hall. And he's another interesting character today. Believe it or not, he still has Orleans. He's still, some version of them, he still plays around with Orleans. He's still involved in music. But he is a United States congressman. So you can you can see him on the news sometimes talking about, you know, political issues. I think he might be a Democrat. So whatever your political proclivities are, I think he's a Democrat. I think he's kind of a hippie Democrat. I think he was kind of you know, no nukes, that whole kind of Gerry Browne, and you know, some of the, what I regard as kind of not quite so in your face politics of the liberalism of the 1970s, which I can stand. Not like today, you know, where everything's so aggressive all the time. But I don't know that much about his politics. But he is a Democrat, and I saw he's big on the environment, which we all are. But anyway, he's a great guitar player, and I mean, he's legit. He's a fine musician, and must be a pretty smart guy, because, you know, he's serving our nation in Congress. So hats off to John Hall. That's good, you know, and. But that song by and Dance With Me is the other one, and that's kind of an acoustic song, but the guitar playing in it is very well done. And you just hear, it's almost like that kind of Ventura Highway type sound to it, but very nice guitar playing. So John Hall, Orleans, Still the One. The next one is the guitar solo in Bob Seger, Mainstreet, one of the greatest Bob Seger songs ever, Mainstreet. That just... I think every man, you know, that's ever been young once and liked a girl, which I imagine is most of us, that song just takes you back, you know, Main Street, down on Main Street, you know, watching this girl walk by and kind of not having the guts to talk to her or whatever. I think she was a dancer too, maybe kind of a, you know. But anyway, the guitar solo in Mainstreet, which is on Night Moves in 1976, I bought that album the day it came out, and I've still got the copy. But that was played by a guy named Pete Carr, and Bob Seger recorded that that part of that album at Muscle Shoals. Now, the interesting kind of story about that is Bob Seger had his live band was the Silver Bullet Band. And I grew up in Detroit, so I know a lot about especially those early Bob Seger songs. And the Silver Bullet Band was just a hard-driving rock and roll bar band. I mean, that's all they were, was a bar band, and they were a damn good bar band. And you listen to Live Bullet, and you can hear just, you know, one of the greatest bar bands I've ever heard. You could just hear them playing in some Detroit bar and people dancing and drinking beer and sweating, and, you know, but they were a bar band, and I love that. But when they did Night Moves, several songs on Night Moves were recorded with Muscle Shoals. Now, Muscle Shoals they were great rockers, but they were polished studio musicians, and Mainstreet is one of those songs. And the guy who played the solo on that was a guy named Pete Carr, and he's not obscure. You can Google him. He was on all kinds of great records, Rod Stewart, all kinds of things. But that solo is so nice, and it's another one that just kind of is part of the song, you know. I mean, I always liked it, but now that I'm older, I really look at it and I realize what a tasteful solo that is, and how it sets that song off, and the kind of intro and the outro lines of the lead guitar too. And that was Pete Carr. Now, I'm from Detroit, and I even kind of have friends of friends that know some of those old Silver Bullet Band guys who were all Detroit guys. And Drew Abbott was kind of ticked off. He was the guitar player on Live Bullet, Beautiful Loser, all that stuff. And he toured with Seger, I think, until the 80s. But one of the reasons he and Bob Seger started not seeing eye to eye was how Bob Seger started doing a lot of stuff with session musicians. And I can kind of see that. And, you know, frankly, some of the kind of mellower Seger, I think, he always had a mellow side, but some of the mellower stuff took him away from, maybe there was sort of one of those creative differences, you know. Hey, we're a Detroit rock band, but boy, I guess the other side of the story is how nice some of that stuff was when he was using studio players, but especially that song Mainstreet. I think definitely one of Bob Seger's best songs in a long career. But that guitar solo is just gorgeous. The guy's name is Pete Carr, so you can Google him. Like I said, I'm not going to go through the bio of every one of these guys, but you Google Pete Carr. He was terrific. The next one is the guitar solo on Linda Ronstadt, Heatwave, which is off her, was it 1975 album, Prisoners in Disguise. And that was played by a guy named Danny Kortchmar. He's another guy you might not have heard of. Some of you, these like I said, these are people that you may well have heard of, but you maybe not have too. He played on Carole King, Carly Simon. Early on, he played with James Taylor, so he's kind of part of that scene. But he was on all kinds of good records. But again, he was always kind of the guy backing a singer. You know, he was backing Carole King, he was backing James Taylor, he was backing, and just a great job, but he was never the guy out front, so he was never a star. But he played some great solos on all that stuff. I think he was on Tapestry by Carole King, which is one of the greatest albums ever made, you know. But Linda Ronstadt was good rock, you know, good party rock in that period. You know, Heart Like a Wheel, but Heatwave, which is an old Martha Reeves and the Vandellas song, it's got a really good solo in it by Danny Kortchmar. I admit I'm kind of taking my personal favorites and my memories of growing up kind of are biasing me, but what the hell. But I just remember riding in the car one time, I think it was about 18 or 19. Now I'd heard the song before, of course, it was on the radio all the time. But it came on, and I remember listening to that solo, and it just sounded so good. Maybe it was a Friday night about 10:30 or 11 p.m. I don't know. Maybe that had something to do with it. But I heard that solo to Heatwave, and ever since then, I just said, man, that was a great guitar solo. And I didn't know who played it or anything, but I've always just remembered. I can even remember where I was when I heard that solo and noticed it. I'd heard the song, but when I really noticed how good that solo was. And it's in Heatwave, and it's just an excellent solo. And it's just a quick pass. He just kind of passes through, you know, I think a verse, and then she comes in on the chorus again, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not a big, long, extended solo, but he puts just the right everything in it. So it's an excellent solo. I still remember where I was when I noticed it, not when I first heard it, when I first noticed it. And it's a great solo. And that guy, is he still? I've got notes here. He's still around. Danny Kortchmar. The next one is kind of interesting. I think you probably heard it, but it was certainly quite popular. It's always been one of my favorite Rod Stewart songs, and that is Rod Stewart, The First Cut is the Deepest, off the A Night on the Town, which is a 1976 album. I bought that, I think, within a week or two of its release, and I still have the copy. But it's interesting, that was recorded at Muscle Shoals. I thought maybe it was that old Pete Carr, because he was on all kinds of records, including several good Bob Seger songs. I think he was on this album. But it's kind of interesting that there's a song, it's an old Cat Stevens song, The First Cut is the Deepest, and that's a Cat Stevens song that's been done by a lot of people. But I think the best version of it ever done, and I don't want to say better than Cat Stevens himself, but the best version of it ever done, I think, is the Rod Stewart version. Rod Stewart's a great artist, by the way. I know he's a celebrity, and you know, but don't ever forget, he's a great artist. He did some great albums. And that's a really good album, but the guitar solo in that, it's another one that's just kind of in the song, but it's a really good song and solo. The First Cut is the Deepest. Now, one interesting thing about that, and this tells you something, everything I read, now this might be out there somewhere, but I was not able to find who played that solo, and that's kind of instructive. There was a list of like 5 or 6 guitar players, including like Joe Walsh, you know, but it didn't say who played that solo, and I looked in several sites, Song Facts, and I couldn't find who played that solo. I guess that tells you something, whoever played it. A lot of these guys played on so many records back then that, you know, next day he probably played on something else, you know, just as good almost, and you know, over time it wasn't written down. He got paid, walked away, and the song went out, and that was it. And you know, all the people can't remember what was what sometimes all these years later. I couldn't find who played that solo, but it was somebody at Muscle Shoals once upon a time, and it was somebody that had, you know, Muscle Shoals, you know, credentials or whatever. But I thought maybe it was Pete Carr. I started looking around at that Pete Carr. He was on a lot of great stuff. He played on Cat Stevens' Is It So, I think. So, and there's some, you know, unlike a lot of Cat Stevens records, there's a really nice guitar solo, and I think it might be by that Pete Carr. It's on a song called Child for a Day. But that Rod Stewart song, if you get a chance to listen to it, it's got a great guitar solo in it. Number 2, I was going to put this number 1, but I saved number 1 because I thought it was extra good. But this was originally my number 1. And it's another guitar solo I heard a million times, always liked it. But you never heard anything about the guitar player. It was never really mentioned as a great solo, in my opinion. And it's a solo by a guy named Jimmy Lyon in Eddie Money's 2 Tickets to Paradise. A lot of these songs are kind of, they're not necessarily songs I would have bought the record to, you know, because I was into, you know, like the Allman Brothers and everything. And some of these guys were a little bit commercial, but Eddie Money did some really good songs, and it was a great singer. But the guitar solo in 2 Tickets to Paradise is awesome. And Eddie Money, and you know, a lot of solo artists kind of, they don't like it if the solo detracts from their vocal, you know. But Eddie Money just let him take off and rip, and it's a great solo. I mean, it's right up there. It's Clapton-esque as far as I'm concerned. He was a great guitar player, and I think he played with Eddie Money for a long time. He played, but this guy's name is Jimmy Lyon, and the guitar solo in Eddie Money 2 Tickets to Paradise is great, and it's a great song. I mean, if you don't like 2 Tickets to Paradise, it's just good old party music, you know. And let me just kind of say, one of the these are all these articles. Why is rock dying? And sometimes it seems like rock is dying, but one of the theories is it's not fun anymore, you know. You know, rock's always this kind of serious thing, you know, mythology or all these kind of ominous, you know, metal tunes. And, you know, rock was fun. It's Friday night, baby. Come on with me, dance. Let's go out. You look so great, you know, party, you know, drink some beer. And that 2 Tickets to Paradise is just a good old Friday night party rock and roll song. You got your girl, you're having a great time. And the guitar solo in it's just awesome. And it's kind of interesting. Some of these are late 70s, you know, and I think the late 70s, a lot of the music was extra good in a lot of ways, but it was more sometimes they called it formula rock. And these kind of crazy rock stars weren't as emphasized, you know. And so he was kind of in there, but he played a killer diller solo, and I think he played out good solos on a lot of Eddie Money's stuff. But that's a great solo. It's just a great guitar solo. 2 Tickets to Paradise. Now, the number one, what I put down as number one is Reggie Young, Drift Away by Dobie Gray. And you know, that's such a great song, and it's not, in some ways it's not a guitar solo, but I thought about it. Reggie Young's another guy. He was part of this Memphis studio, you know, and there was a Memphis sound, and they were kind of like Muscle Shoals in Alabama, and in LA you had the Wrecking Crew, in New York you had the Brill Building, in Chicago, in Detroit you had the Funk Brothers. Well, there was a Memphis sound, and he was like one of these Memphis guys. And Reggie Young, he played on all kinds of great records. Dusty Springfield, Elvis, he played with the Suspicious Minds with Elvis Presley. And he played Neil Diamond. He's on a bunch of those old great Neil Diamond songs. But that Dobie Gray, he did that awesome song. And, you know, you look, I don't even think he knows really how he did it. It's not flashy, but it's just got such tasty little slides and licks in it. And that opening of that is so good. And in some way, I think I'm going to call it a guitar solo because it's so integral to the song. So it's not a, you know, that kind of solo necessarily, but it's just really good professional guitar playing. And it was key to that song's success. And that song, Drift Away, is such an awesome tune. I mean, you just can't hear it and leave the radio low. And but that Reggie Young's kind of interesting, and he's another guy. I think he played that day and kind of came up with that part, walked away from it, and he probably got paid some day rate in the studio, and that song went on to, you know, it's still played all the time, and that was, you know, 50 years ago almost. So some of these guys sound kind of bitter. You know, because their music's so popular and they're not famous, and I don't think they made much, if any, money from it. You know, they got paid that day, maybe. You know, so they're unsung in a lot of ways. But that's a great song, Reggie Young, "Drift Away," by Dobie Gray. And Dobie Gray had another song called "I'm In with the In Crowd." It was, you know, that was an interesting period. Let me just conclude. That was an FM rock song, but it was kind of FM and AM. There was a period where they were kind of blurry. Like you'd hear some of that stuff. Like I remember hearing like John Denver on WRIF in Detroit, and but Dobie Gray, you'd hear some of that FM stuff that was on AM radio, and you'd also hear it on FM. You know, and stuff Sweet. You know, Radar Love, Deep Smoke on the Water was an AM hit. You know, at that time. So you'd hear that song, but it's a good rock song, I think, Drift Away. And the guy's name who played that great guitar is Reggie Young. So hats off to all those people. Not all of them are alive, but they're unsung, but they did a great job. You know, they got paid to do that job. You know, I doubt some of these guys might be, I don't know. But, you know, some of them, I doubt they're sitting there by the pool every day, filthy rich, like you know, some of the stars are. But they did a great job, and they're great musicians, and every one of those solos is superb. So hats off to all those 10 guys. You wanted to give one honorable mention, and you know what it is? Jimmy Page, "Stairway to Heaven." You know why? That's probably always cited as one of the greatest, a lot of people say the greatest rock guitar solo ever. But you know what? It's kind of unsung in at least one way. And it is a solo in the service of the song. Jimmy Page played that, and it's exactly what needed to be in that song. And Jimmy Page was a studio musician, you know. So that solo is, for that song, like these other solos I mentioned, it's in the song, it flows with the song, it complements the song. It doesn't detract from the song, you know, it doesn't become the song. It's part of the song. And that just shows you how great Jimmy Page was. Because I think it's not unsung, but in that sense, I think it's unsung that, you know, that it was a studio complement the song in the service of the song solo, which I think is why the overall song is so good. Thank you. God bless you.